I never imagined that my quiet life could spiral into such a whirlwind of emotion and forbidden desire. For most of my adult life, I had been content with the predictable, the familiar, my job as a literature professor at the local college, my cozy, well-kept home, my small circle of friends. After my divorce 8 years ago, I had sworn off relationships. I was 46 now, settled into a comfortable routine, and I thought that was enough. That was until Nathan came into my life. Nathan was a student in my advanced British literature class. He was 27, strikingly handsome, with unruly dark hair and a rugged charm that made him stand out among the rest of the students. His passion for literature was evident in every discussion, every essay he turned in. He had a way with words, a depth of understanding that was rare for someone his age. I admired his intellect, his thirst for knowledge. It was a purely professional admiration, or so I thought. It started innocently enough. Nathan would often stay behind after class to discuss the readings with me. He had a sharp mind, and our conversations were always engaging, often extending far beyond the assigned texts. We talked about everything: books, life, the future. I found myself looking forward to these conversations, enjoying the time we spent together. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. One day, after a particularly lively discussion about James Joyce, Nathan suggested that we continue our conversation over coffee. I hesitated for a moment, aware of the boundaries that needed to be maintained between professor and student, but his enthusiasm was infectious. I agreed, convincing myself that it was just coffee, just a continuation of our intellectual exchange. The coffee shop was quiet, tucked away in a corner of town that I rarely visited. As we sat across from each other, sipping our drinks, the conversation flowed effortlessly. But there was an undercurrent, a tension that hadn't been there before. I noticed the way Nathan's eyes lingered on me a little longer than necessary, the way his smile seemed to hold a hint of something more. And then there was the way he touched my hand lightly as he made a point, a touch that sent a shiver down my spine. I dismissed it as nothing, a fleeting moment of connection that didn't mean anything, but I was wrong. As the weeks passed, that tension grew, became more palpable. I started to notice Nathan's presence in a way I hadn't before. The way he leaned in when we talked, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me. And I began to feel something that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time, a desire, an attraction that was both thrilling and terrifying. I tried to push it away, to keep things professional, but it became increasingly difficult. The more time we spent together, the more I found myself drawn to him. He was young, vibrant, full of life, and I couldn't help but be captivated by him. I knew it was wrong, that there was no future in it, but I couldn't stop myself from wanting him. One evening, after a particularly intense discussion in my office, Nathan lingered as the other students filed out. There was a silence between us, heavy with unspoken words. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and I felt my resolve crumbling. "Professor, he began, but I cut him off. "Please, Nathan, don't." My voice was barely a whisper. He stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "I can't pretend anymore," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I'm drawn to you. There's something between us, and I think you feel it too." I should have stopped him, should have told him that it was inappropriate, that nothing could ever happen between us. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself leaning into him, my breath hitching as his hand brushed my cheek. "Nathan, this is wrong," I whispered. But even as I said the words, I didn't pull away. "Maybe it is," he murmured, his lips inches from mine. "But I don't care." And then he kissed me. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was waiting for me to stop him. But I didn't. I couldn't. The feel of his lips on mine, the warmth of his body so close to mine, it was like a dam breaking inside me. All the emotions I'd kept locked away for so long flooding out in a rush. We shouldn't have, but we did. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more desperate. My hands tangled in his hair, his arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer. It was as if years of loneliness and longing were being channeled into that moment, into that kiss. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless, our hearts racing. I looked into his eyes, seeing a mixture of desire and concern there. "We can't," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "I know," he replied, his thumb brushing over my bottom lip. "But I can't stop thinking about you. I don't want to stop." I wanted to tell him that we had to, that this could ruin both of us, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself nodding, agreeing to something that I knew was wrong on so many levels. After that night, everything changed. We continued to meet, but now there was a new layer to our interactions, a secret that we shared. We were careful, so careful to keep up appearances in front of others. But when we were alone, that carefulness dissolved, replaced by a hunger that neither of us could control. We began meeting in secret, always aware of the risks, but unable to resist the pull between us. There were stolen kisses in my office, whispered conversations in empty hallways, and eventually, nights spent tangled in each other's arms. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I knew what we were doing was wrong, that I was risking my career, my reputation, everything I had worked so hard for. But in those moments with Nathan, nothing else seemed to matter. The guilt, however, was never far away. It gnawed at me, a constant reminder that what we were doing was forbidden. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that we were both adults, that it was just a fling, something that would burn out eventually. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was falling for him, and that terrified me more than anything. Nathan, for his part, seemed unfazed by the situation. He was always the one to initiate our meetings, the one who reassured me that everything would be fine. But I could see the strain in his eyes sometimes, the way he would look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He was just as caught up in this as I was, and I couldn't help but wonder how long we could keep it up before everything came crashing down. The turning point came one evening after a particularly passionate night together. We were lying in bed, our bodies still entwined, when Nathan turned to me, his expression more serious than I had ever seen. "We can't keep doing this," he said quietly. I felt a pang of fear in my chest. "What do you mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I mean, this isn't sustainable. We're living in a fantasy, pretending that there are no consequences to what we're doing. But there are, and we can't ignore that forever." I knew he was right, but hearing him say it made my heart ache. So what do we do? Nathan was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But I can't keep sneaking around like this. It's tearing me apart." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered. He looked at me then, his eyes filled with pain. "I don't want to lose you either, but I don't want to destroy you either." For the first time since we had started this affair, I felt the full weight of what we were doing. It wasn't just about the risk to my career, or the scandal that could ensue if we were found out. It was about the damage we were doing to ourselves, to each other. We had gotten so caught up in the passion, in the thrill of the forbidden, that we had lost sight of the reality of the situation. That night, we made the difficult decision to end things. It was heartbreaking, but we both knew it was the only way to salvage what was left of our lives. We agreed to part as friends to try and move on from this, but the pain of losing him was almost unbearable. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I saw Nathan in class every day, and each time it was like a knife twisting in my heart. We maintained our professional relationship, kept up the facade that everything was normal, but there was an emptiness between us that hadn't been there before. I missed him terribly, missed the connection we had shared, the way he made me feel. But I knew it was for the best. I threw myself into my work, trying to fill the void that Nathan had left. I kept telling myself that it would get easier, that the pain would eventually fade. But it didn't. If anything, it only grew worse. It wasn't until the end of the semester that I realized just how much I had lost. Nathan came to my office one last time, his expression somber. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said quietly. "I'm transferring to another school next semester." I felt my heart drop. "Why?" He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I need a fresh start," he said finally. "This place, it has too many memories." I nodded, understanding what he meant. "I'll miss you," I whispered, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I'll miss you too." We stood there in silence for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say, and then he stepped forward, pulling me into a tight embrace. I clung to him, trying to memorize the feel of him, the scent of him, knowing that this was the last time I would ever hold him. When he finally pulled away, he pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. "Take care of yourself, Eleanor," he whispered, and then he was gone, leaving me standing there with tears streaming down my face. In the months that followed, I tried to move on. I threw myself into my work, took up new hobbies, even started dating again. But nothing could fill the void that Nathan had left. I thought about him constantly, wondering where he was, what he was doing, if he was happy. I wanted to reach out, to find him, but I knew that it would only make things worse. It wasn't until nearly a year later that I finally started to heal. I still thought about Nathan, still missed him, but the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. I had come to terms with the fact that what we had was over, that it was a part of my past that I needed to let go of. But I never forgot him. I never forgot the way he made me feel, the way he had opened up a part of me that I thought was long dead. I knew that I would carry that memory with me for the rest of my life. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and the world outside was still, I would think about him, about what could have been. I would wonder if he ever thought about me, if he ever regretted ending things the way we did. But I knew that it was better this way, that we had made the right choice. And in the end, I found solace in the fact that, for a brief moment in time, I had experienced something truly extraordinary. It may have been forbidden, it may have been fleeting, but it was real. And that was something I would always treasure. Even as I tried to move forward with my life, the memory of Nathan lingered, like a shadow that followed me wherever I went. I told myself that time would heal the wound, that eventually the sharp pain of loss would fade into something more bearable. But some days, it felt as though time had only deepened the ache. The summer months passed in a blur of activity. I spent long hours at the college working on a new syllabus and preparing for the upcoming semester. I kept busy with various projects, filling my days with tasks that would distract me from the thoughts that seemed to constantly invade my mind. I saw friends, attended social gatherings, and even went on a few dates. But nothing seemed to fill the emptiness that Nathan had left behind. I didn't hear from him during that time, and I told myself it was for the best. We had both needed a clean break, a chance to move on and start fresh. But that didn't stop me from wondering about him, from wishing I could reach out and hear his voice, just one more time. I knew I couldn't, that doing so would only reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. So I buried those feelings deep down and tried to carry on with my life. As the new semester approached, I felt a sense of dread settle over me. The thought of returning to the classroom, of standing in front of a room full of students and pretending that everything was normal, filled me with anxiety. I had always loved teaching, but now it felt like a burden, a constant reminder of what I had lost. On the first day of classes, I stood in front of the mirror in my office, smoothing down my skirt and taking a deep breath. I could do this, I told myself. I had to. But as I walked into the classroom and saw the faces of my new students, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. There was no Nathan among them, no familiar face to greet me with a smile. The class went smoothly enough, but I felt like I was going through the motions. The passion that had once driven me seemed to have faded, leaving me feeling empty and disconnected. I gave my lectures, assigned readings, and held discussions, but my heart wasn't in it. I knew my students could sense it too, that something was missing. One afternoon, as I was grading papers in my office, there was a knock at the door. I looked up, expecting to see one of my students, but instead I found myself staring into a pair of familiar brown eyes. "Nathan," I whispered, my heart skipping a beat. He stood in the doorway, looking almost the same as when I had last seen him, though there was a certain weariness in his expression. He smiled, but it was a tentative, uncertain smile, as if he wasn't sure how I would react to seeing him again. "Hi, Eleanor," he said softly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." I shook my head, still in shock. "No, not at all. Please, come in." He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence heavy with unspoken words. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of emotions swirling inside me: joy, fear, longing, and uncertainty. "I didn't expect to see you," I finally said, my voice trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure if I should come," Nathan admitted, his hands fidgeting nervously. "But I've been thinking about you, Eleanor. A lot. I needed to see you, to talk to you." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit down." He sat, and I could see the tension in his posture, the way he held himself as if he were bracing for something. I wanted to reach out, to reassure him, but I wasn't sure what to say, how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. "How have you been?" I asked, my voice soft. He hesitated before answering. "I've been okay. The new school is fine, and the coursework is challenging. But it's not the same, Eleanor. I've missed you." The raw honesty in his voice hit me like a punch to the gut. I had missed him too, more than I had allowed myself to admit. But I had been so determined to move on, to convince myself that it was better this way, that hearing him say those words now felt like a reopening of old wounds. "I've missed you too, Nathan," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I don't know what I'm doing here, Eleanor. I just know that I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with how things ended between us. I thought I could move on, but I can't. You mean too much to me." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I blinked them away, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Nathan, I don't know what to say. I've been trying so hard to do the right thing, to put this behind me, but it hasn't been easy." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I don't want to lose you, Eleanor. I don't care about the risks, the consequences. I just know that I can't go on like this, pretending that I don't feel what I feel for you." I felt a surge of emotion, a longing that I had tried so hard to bury, but there it was, bubbling to the surface, refusing to be ignored. "Nathan, I'm scared. I'm scared of what this could mean, of what could happen if we try to be together. I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to hurt myself." He reached across the desk, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, comforting, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me. "Eleanor, we've been hurting ourselves by staying apart. Maybe it won't be easy. Maybe we'll face challenges, but I'm willing to take that risk if it means being with you." I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the depth of his feelings, and in that moment, I knew that I couldn't keep running from this, from him. I had tried to do what I thought was right, but all it had brought me was pain and loneliness. "Nathan," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to be with you too. I can't keep denying it." His face lit up with relief, and he squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out together, Eleanor. Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together." For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't that all my fears and doubts had disappeared, but there was a sense of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to make this work. We spent the rest of that afternoon talking, reconnecting, sharing everything that had happened since we had last seen each other. It was like a dam had burst, and all the emotions, the longing, the love that we had kept bottled up came pouring out. By the time the sun began to set, we were both exhausted but relieved, as if a great burden had been lifted. As Nathan stood to leave, he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "I'm not letting you go again," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm not letting you go either," I replied, my heart full. And as we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to take the risk, to fight for what we had, because in the end, love was worth fighting for. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Nathan and I spent as much time together as we could, talking about our future, about how we would navigate the challenges ahead. We knew that our relationship would have to remain a secret for now, that we would have to be careful, but the secrecy no longer felt like a burden. It was simply a necessary part of protecting what we had. We both knew that there would be obstacles, that we would have to face the judgment of others, the potential consequences of our relationship becoming public. But we were prepared to face those challenges together, to support each other through whatever came our way. As the months passed, our bond grew stronger. We learned to navigate the complexities of our relationship, to balance the passion we felt with the need for discretion. There were moments of doubt, of fear, but there were also moments of joy, of connection that I had never experienced before. Nathan became a constant presence in my life, a source of strength and comfort. We found ways to be together, to carve out moments of happiness in the midst of the uncertainty. We traveled together, explored new places, and created memories that we would both cherish forever. But as time went on, the reality of our situation began to weigh on us. We knew that we couldn't keep our relationship a secret forever, that eventually we would have to face the world and the consequences of our love. We talked about the future, about what we wanted, and we both knew that we wanted to be together no matter what. It was during one of those conversations, late at night as we lay in bed, that Nathan brought up the possibility of leaving the town, of starting fresh somewhere new where we could be together openly. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice soft as he traced patterns on my skin. "What if we moved away, somewhere where no one knows us? We could start over, live the life we want without all the secrecy." The idea was tempting, and for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine it. A life where we could be together without fear, without judgment. But then reality set in, and I knew that it wasn't that simple. "Nathan, I love the idea of starting over, but we can't just run away from our problems. We have responsibilities here, people who depend on us. We have to face this head on, not hide from it." He sighed, his hand stilling on my skin. "I know you're right. I just want to be with you, Eleanor. I want to build a life with you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I reached up, cupping his face in my hands. "We will build a life together, Nathan, but we have to do it the right way. We'll face whatever comes our way, and we'll do it together." He nodded, leaning in to kiss me softly. "I'll follow your lead, Eleanor. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." We spent the next few weeks preparing for the inevitable. We knew that it was only a matter of time before our relationship became public, before we had to face the consequences of our love. We talked to a few trusted friends, sought legal advice, and made a plan for how we would handle things when the time came. And then, one day, it happened. A student, one of Nathan's classmates, saw us together, saw the way we looked at each other, and rumors began to spread. At first, it was just whispers, but soon enough, the rumors reached the administration, and we were called in for a meeting. As we sat in that office, facing the dean and the college's legal counsel, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We had prepared for this, we knew what to expect, and we were ready to face it together. The dean was stern but not unkind. He expressed his concern about the nature of our relationship, about the potential impact on the college's reputation, but he also acknowledged that we were both consenting adults. "We understand that this is a complicated situation," he said, his tone measured, "but we also have to consider the broader implications for the college. We need to find a resolution that is fair to everyone involved." Nathan and I had discussed this moment at length, and we had come to a decision. We knew that continuing to work together at the same institution would be untenable, so I offered to resign from my position at the end of the semester. "This has been my home for many years," I said, my voice steady, "but I recognize that my relationship with Nathan presents a conflict of interest. I'm willing to step down to ensure that the college's integrity is maintained." The dean seemed relieved by my offer, and after some discussion, we reached an agreement. I would finish out the semester, and then I would leave the college, allowing Nathan to continue his education without further controversy. As we left the meeting, hand in hand, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. sadness at the thought of leaving a place that had been such a big part of my life, but relief that we could finally move forward, no longer hiding in the shadows. The weeks that followed were bittersweet. I said my goodbyes to colleagues and students, wrapped up my work, and prepared to leave the college that had been my home for so long. But through it all, Nathan was by my side, a constant source of strength and support. When the semester ended, we packed up my house, said our goodbyes to friends, and set off on a new adventure. We moved to a small town in the mountains, a place where we could build a life together, away from the judgment and scrutiny of others. There, in that quiet, peaceful place, we found a new beginning. We bought a small house with a garden, surrounded by trees and the sound of birdsong. We spent our days exploring the wilderness, our nights wrapped in each other's arms, and slowly, the wounds of the past began to heal. Nathan continued his studies at a nearby university, and I found work as a freelance editor, spending my days surrounded by books and words, just as I had always loved. We built a life together, one filled with love and laughter, and I knew that I had made the right choice. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, of fear, but we faced them together, drawing strength from each other. And as the years passed, I knew that I had found something truly special, something worth fighting for. Nathan and I grew closer with each passing day, our bond deepening as we navigated the challenges of life together. We faced the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows, and through it all, our love remained strong. We didn't need to hide anymore. We were free to be ourselves, to love each other openly, and that freedom brought a sense of peace that I had never known before. Looking back on everything we had been through, I knew that it had all been worth it. The secrecy, the tension, the moral conflict, it had all led us to this moment, to a life where we could be together, where we could be happy. And as I stood in the garden one morning, watching the sunrise with Nathan by my side, I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. This was our life, our love, and it was more than I had ever dared to dream of.